Chapter 9. In this chapter, we will look at the treatment of ADHD and other medications that can be used for attention disorders. When we have a client come in, and whether it's a child or an adult who would like perhaps an assessment or just come in with symptoms that might be of ADD or ADHD, what's very important to take into consideration is to get a thorough background of the family history to see if there have been other family members that have been diagnosed with attention disorders. If it's an adult or a teenager, we might want to look at substance abuse to rule out perhaps if it's another disorder. If they're taking, and for example, if it's substance abuse and they are taking something like meth or cocaine or even marijuana, that can lead to sometimes attention disorders or may mask as an attention disorder. Um, just an example, I've had many students who have requested assessment or their parents have requested assessment because they're having issues in school. They're having poor grades. They have the inability to attend to task, and the parents are worried that there's a learning disability. But as soon as I talk to these students, get a thorough background, find out just were they attending school regularly, and just all the information I might ask uh, during the assessment, I find out that there was frequent marijuana use. So because of that, of course, poor grades, there might be a lack of motivation, their inability to attend to task or attend to instructions. And as parents would think that it's a learning disability, and we would go through the assessment, we'd find out, and actually I can usually rule out during my interviews as well as my observations, because when they come to me, a lot they're in camp already, that it was more of the substance use that was playing a part in their inattentive behaviors as opposed to it really being an attention disorder. And there are various assessment tools of if we are able to review previous records, that's a medical history, any kind of school records, that's helpful. Interviewing the client, family members, observations while client is there, as well as other assessment tools like behavior scales, the Conners. There's other ADHD or ADD rating scales that can be used to rule in or rule out an attention disorder. With saying that, it's good to also look at, because we might have those parents who come into our office, or if we're working um, in whatever capacity of counseling, because they're concerned about the behavior of their child. And it's not only being exhibited at school, but also at home. The kid might, at school, teacher reports that the kid appears bored. You may see peaks and valleys, or highs and lows in their grades, or in math. You know that the child scored high one week and really aced or a test, but then the next week they have fallen below. So we'll see those peaks and valleys in grades or in different academic areas. They might be disruptive. They may appear aggressive with other classmates or rude with teachers. They may not be able to sit still at home. So parents might bring the child in concern because these behaviors are being exhibited at school and at home. So it's very important that we investigate and do thorough observations. And the various examples I gave you, an acronym that I sometimes use is RIOT, in which I learned in one of my graduate programs, and it's review of records, interview, observation, and test. So if we can RIOT, um, is very helpful in ruling in or ruling out in any kind of attention disorder, and it also will assist us in creating the appropriate treatment plan. As we look at the various types of medications that can be used, we have amphetamine stimulants, which are like a Dexedrine or an Adderall. And if you look at some of the side effects of the amphetamines, because they are a stimulant, it's the loss of appetite, weight loss. There's sometimes sleep problems, and there are different types where some are short acting, and some are long acting where it can last within 24 hours. But you will find common with stimulants, and even if you look at the methylphenidate stimulants like a Ritalin or Concerta, they all have that same kind of effect of loss of appetite, weight loss, sleep problems, irritability, tics, and various things like that. So you kind of see why perhaps, and of course when you hear an amphetamine or a stimulant, why parents might be concerned, or even if it's an adult, on getting on a medication such as an Adderall, Dexedrine, Ritalin, or Concerta. Uh, but if a client is on the medication or considering it, and they're having certain issues such as sleep problems, something that can be done if they are experiencing sleep disturbances. Certain things such as a Benadryl might be given on a daily basis to kind of counter the whole sleep issues. So that's one of the pros and cons of using stimulants. Now we look at non-stimulants like Strattera, Intuitive, which are really great. The non-stimulant medications like a Strattera or an Intuitive are new to both children and adults. For the most part, they will usually prescribe it around ages between like 6 to 17 of age. What's great about these non-stimulants, such as a Strattera, is that it increases the amount of norepinephrine into the brain, and with this increase appears to help the ADHD by increasing attention span and reducing impulsive behaviors and hyperactivity. But as you can see with the non-stimulants, there are those side effects of sleep problems, anxiety, upset stomach, as well as sleepiness and headache and fatigue. So when you look at the pros and cons of using the stimulant, where there might be sleep problems and agitation, versus the non-stimulants where there's still sleep problems and headaches, you have to kind of outweigh the side effects, the good and the bad. As well as there might be clients that have tried one and it didn't work for them, so then there of course are other options, such as an antidepressant. Antidepressants can be used as an alternative, such as like a Wellbutrin, to treat individuals that might have a tolerance or abuse of a stimulant. That might be a problem. The positive effects of antidepressants is that it will kind of address all components of ADHD, the inattentiveness, the impulsivity, and the hyperactivity. There is another option for children whose response to stimulant medication has been inadequate. So that's what's also great about using an antidepressant, that if the stimulants if the client, whether it's an adult or a child, they found problems taking the stimulant as well as a non-stimulant, there's still the other option of the antidepressants. They are also used as an alternative for children who experience unacceptable side effects, such as the tics or the insomnias from the stimulants. All types of antidepressants, with the exception of MAOIs, can be used and have been used to treat ADHD or attention disorders. So we have, for like the tricyclics antidepressants, like a Pamlor or Topranil. The SNRIs, which I mentioned earlier, like a Wellbutrin, can be used. And SSRIs such as Prozac has been used, Effexor. So pretty much so, we're also looking at, of course, what are the side effects for each of the antidepressant classes, and that's going to play a part probably in what is going to be most effective for the client, as well as we also look at symptoms. But it's just to show that they are not just limited to stimulants, that there are various types of medications that can be used, from the stimulant to the non-stimulant and even antidepressants. And finally, blood pressure medication has been used to treat ADHD or attention disorders. And like any other hypertensive drug, these type of drugs work by controlling nerve impulses along certain nerve pathways, and as a result it relaxes blood vessels so that the blood can pass through more easily, and this helps lower blood pressure. But they've also found that it has regulated the neurotransmitters, especially the norepinephrine, and may be effective in reducing the symptoms of ADHD. It can be used alone, if we look at like a Clonidine or a Xanax, or it might be in combination with the stimulant. So even with this type of medication, it just depends on, we're looking at what the symptoms are, taking a medication history, what might have worked, and then of course as we take all these things into consideration, this is also another option. From a psychological treatment stance, although we're keeping in mind medication management, or when we have a client in the office with us, from our side, it's also very important to look at what areas that the client might be having issues in. And from there, we can create a appropriate treatment. So are we looking at, they might have social skills issues. Let's say they're having issues in school, or if they're adults, they're having issues interacting because of their behavior and their impulsivity. Or even if they internalize their impulsivity, so they feel like this internal agitation, which might end up manifesting in inappropriate or negative behaviors in a work area, or amongst peers with significant others. We can look at that. So time management techniques, if they're having issues with, or even organization with submitting assignments, we may look at daily coping strategies. So there are a variety of ways to work with this client for treatment and in counseling. But first, it's just very important to see what areas that they're having issues in. And that's where we would, of course, direct our focus in a counseling setting. Finally, just to keep in mind from a medication stance, if you look at the last bullet, how medications are typically given by titrating doses upward until complete. Excuse the typo, should be complete, not compete. Symptomatic relief is obtained. So of course we start at a low dose, and the psychiatrist or physician, whether it's the general practitioner, will slowly start increasing until we see that a significant reduction in symptoms, or to a point where they may be asymptomatic.